You're listening to an AINC original podcast. We believe you don't have to do life without a compass. Let us be your guide on this amazing journey. Welcome to Navigating Life with Vision Loss. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Navigating Life with Vision Loss. My name is Jonathan Price, the podcast and programming producer here, and I want to thank you so much for all of your donations for the Colorado Gives Day event happening so far. Your last day to get donations in is December 5th, so please get those donations in. Again, thank you so much. We're going to dive back into our interview with Penny Melville Brown, the blind baker, and her story is just incredible. And if you think last week's episode was awesome, wait until you hear some of the very interesting experiences she's had with chefs all around the world. All right, Kim, take it away.
So, Penny, as you're traveling around the world and you're working with cordon bleu chefs, home chefs,
Yep.
How are they reacting to you as a blind person? Are they concerned you're going to chop your fingers
Absolutely off? Absolutely terrified. You know, here am I, this blind person, whacking around with their stick, coming into their, highly professional, very sophisticated kitchens. And they were horrified. And you could feel, there was one in San Francisco who was a dear young man. And you could see that his boss had volunteered him to do this. And he'd offered me these really simple dishes to cook. Oh my goodness. A bit of chopped up fruit wrapped up in pastry. Just nonsense. So my job was actually just to chat to them and talk to them and get them to understand that I understood about cooking. I could do it too. I've been doing it probably longer than they had. I knew what I was doing. And with him, we discussed pastry, and he made his pie pastry, which is an Americanism, in one way. And I said, I think I'd make it this way. And, we compared our recipes and things like that. And he started to realize that I knew what I was doing. And I made my bit of chopped up fruit in a pastry case. Good Lord. Threw it in the oven. But what he then graduated me to make very complicated tulle biscuits. And those are ones where you put a little puddle on a piece of greaseproof paper or parchment paper on a baking tray. And I tell you, for a blind person, putting little puddles of something on a tray is one of the most difficult things to do. But I managed to do that too. So he was satisfied that I'd managed it. But throughout, with lots of these professional chefs, they were incredibly nervous. They were kind, but they had no idea that a blind person could do anything. When I was in China, and again I was with the head chefs. It was a big hotel. It had 3 or 4 restaurants, so I was cooking with each of them. And in their not their civilization, I think their professional community where they worked, and they were all Chinese, they had no exposure to visually impaired people at all. So they couldn't even understand how I could eat, never mind cook, and how was I ever going to travel?
Right. Because people are kept away, they're kind of hidden.
Well, actually they're not.
No?
Because we brought a couple of visually impaired Chinese women in to cook with us.
Oh, okay.
And they were super. In China, they do help visually impaired people, and they put them through school and they learn to read and write. They got Braille or whatever. And they train them to work. And a lot of them go into masseurs. And that's not, the red light district and all the
Right.
Lots of people think about massage. It's actually part of their medical culture. And you've heard of acupuncture.
Yes.
So they're massaging in that medical environment. But they also live in that medical environment, and they sleep on the couches their clients use during the day. And an auntie, that's what they call her, comes in and cooks for them. So we had these two girls in, and they had almost certainly never handled a chef's knife. You know, those great big, heavy, sharp things. I don't use those either. And these chefs were overwhelmed by these girls, their enthusiasm, their, interest, their ability, their motivation. I actually just stepped back and let the chefs talk to the Chinese women in their own language, and you could see the change that happened as these men suddenly recognized that blindness wasn't the end of the world. We can still do lots of things. So throughout all of this, I was my nephew Toby came out to join up with me at various locations because he was taking videos for me. So I came back to the UK after it all with, just masses, about 150 odd videos, just all unedited. And then I was going over to France to look for some European cooking. And while I was in France, I had this major car accident. And I ended up in hospital. So I'd been in this car crash, and I'd broken my C2 vertebra, which is the one right at the very top of your neck, under C1. And breaks there are sort of fatal, or you're not going to walk again, or you're going to be very, very lucky. And I'd also broken another lower vertebra, and then all my sternum, all down my front, and all the ribs on my left-hand side. And because I had so much internal damage as well, they couldn't perform surgery on me to repair this neck break. So they had to put me in a sort of fiberglass collar so that gradually my neck would be held up and it would fuse by itself. So they put me into a coma for 6 weeks.
Oh my.
And I was in intensive care for 2 months. And then I went into a rehabilitation hospital for another 3 months because I had to learn how to sit, how to stand, how to walk, and how to go upstairs. And it was quite challenging because, I'd forgotten, I was blind as well. And I was in France. So they spoke French. And
did you at least get good French food? I don't know.
I think food was the least of my interests at that time. But there was and with this neck brace, I couldn't really talk because it kept my mouth up like that.
Oh, right.
So trying to communicate was very difficult. And in the end, we had to do it. I had to write. I hadn't seen my handwriting for at least 20 years by then. So they gave me paper and I needed a pen. And this is the schoolgirl French. And I don't know whether you'll even understand it, but I asked for la plume de ma tante. You see, you don't understand it, do you? Older people might. So it was, can I have my aunt's quill pen?
Plume, I was going to say a pen.
Yes,
yeah.
It's the feather pen that people used to use back in, centuries ago. Anyway, they were wonderful. It was exceptional care. And I was really motivated to get better, get well. And I got back to the UK in 2018. And I spent the next few years recovering from this massive accident and really learning how to walk again and do all sorts of things. But I was still cooking.
But you still had to do some additional adaptation. I know in your website you could reference the fact you'd been blind for so long you thought you knew about living with disabilities, and then after this crash you had other issues now on top of that.
I did have other
issues to deal with.
And that was a huge struggle. But what kept me going, and again, I hope you can hear a bit of determination and motivation here, because part of my project for the Holman Prize was I had gone around the world. I'd done all these videos and I collected lots of recipes. And I wanted to finish that in my head, in my mind. As far as they were concerned, it was done really. But I wanted to complete this for myself. So part of my therapy was writing the book of all my adventures with all the recipes in it, which is available in America via Amazon.
Yes.
But also I had all these 150 videos that needed to be edited and put on YouTube because I wanted other people to see what was possible. And that was a really key part of my recovery, to have this project that was very dear to my heart, that a lot of people had helped me with. People from all over the world had given me their support. And how could I just disappear and not, pay them back and say thank you by, writing up their recipes, featuring them in a YouTube video. So I really felt very determined to do that. So all that went on, and then we got pretty much into COVID. And one of the local visual impairment charities in the UK asked if I would do online cooking courses, cooking demonstrations, I think is fairer, for local visually impaired people. So we did it on Zoom, and about once a month I would be there and they could sat my laptop in the kitchen and I would cook something fairly straightforward to start with, how to make the simplest bread in the world in 25 minutes, to things that got increasingly elaborate. And so people would dial in and watch me do it, cook a lot. Most of them cooked along with me. So, I'd have somebody from, miles away cooking along and others from even further away, chatting to me, making sure, checking the recipe with me, telling me what theirs was getting too brown if they could see it. But they were all visually impaired people. So we were all cooking together so that we became a sort of team, a group of people, and they would swap recipes, swap ideas. And that's what I've been doing during COVID. And I've done some more since then. And that sort of just about brings me up to date, except for the latest accident, which is why I'm sitting here in an orthopedic chair, because I managed to fall down the stairs about 3 months ago. So I've got another vertebra fracture. And I'm living in my conservatory, looking out over the garden, if I could see it, in a hospital bed, which is just on the other side of the room. And I'm starting on my second book now, which is about living with disability. And I hope I've got some experience to share. Sorry.
Maybe more than you'd counted on.
Yes.
Well, and I've watched a few of your videos because you've also been involved with the in the UK with the Talking Newspaper Federation.
Oh, yes. Well, you remember I said that I'd had this accident?
Yes.
Just recently. The next day after I came out of hospital, I was supposed to be up at Coventry, where the National Talking Newspaper Federation were having their annual convention. And I was the keynote speaker. And I wasn't able to go because I was just about hanging on here, just having come out of hospital, sort of garbling at them. I hope I'm talking better to you than I did to them. But I had this audience of people in this theatre where I was supposed to be chatting. But yes, I've started to do some recipes that I'm doing audio recordings with them, so that people who perhaps have never cooked but have lost their sight, or people who used to cook and are not so confident anymore about being in the kitchen, can get back to cooking and making things, not just for themselves, not just to keep, some food on the table. But I think cooking is really important for rediscovering social interactions. So if you make some biscuits, you can give one to the postman or somebody else who does a delivery. You can take some round to some neighbours. You can invite people round to have a simple lunch with you. And you start having more social interaction than just listening to a microwave ping and pulling the cover off a ready meal. So that's part of my drive now. And I'm doing more talking to more groups of visually impaired people, and seeing if they are interested in being involved, doing more cooking together.
Well, and that gets into nutrition and all kinds of things. It's just so much healthier.
Yes, absolutely. We eat here, just fresh food. Now I might do batch cooking so that I can make lots of food that I can keep in the freezer, but I know what's gone into it from the start. And I do have somebody, when I'm doing a lot of cooking, I have somebody who comes in to help me. She happens to also look after the house for me. She's been with me for over 20 years now. So, one of the joys, don't forget, blind people, there are joys. And one of them is never vacuuming again, never dusting again, and never, ever doing the ironing again. Fabulous. So she comes in and does that sort of stuff for me. But she also helps me sometimes with cooking as well.
So, as you mentioned, you had cooked for years. It sounded like even as a child you learned to cook. I know that's when I first started cooking and learning things. As you lost your vision and you continue to cook, obviously you've made adaptations. What are some of the most helpful tools that you have?
I think the most important adaptive equipment I have is talking scales and a talking thermometer. For both of them, and I'm going to say this and you'll hate me for it, I prefer to audition their talking voices because my scales have got a very nice, very polite English accent, where an awful lot of the other equipment is much more American in tone. And I find the English accent much easier in my kitchen. So I'm really sorry.
That's okay. I know quite a few people who choose a English or British accent or on their phones too.
Yes.
So when they're talking to Siri or whatever.
Yes. So I apologise for that, but I would always commend actually auditioning anything that talks for you, because different voices will have different clarity for you, and that's what I found. The talking thermometer I use if I'm cooking meat. So I know that, as a rule of thumb, I'm looking for meat to get to 70 degrees centigrade. But of course, you use Fahrenheit, and I've no idea how that works.
That's all right. Folks can ask Siri or something.
I also use it if I'm cooking bread, if I'm cooking cakes, nearly anything, because I know what temperature I want to reach, what is the correct temperature for what I'm doing. I'm also doing it, I can feel the cake or whatever. So I'm getting that, how soft is it in the middle? How firm is it on the outside? All that sort of stuff. But I don't want to overcook it. So temperature, give me a clue. Yeah, that's okay. That can come out of the oven and that can just wait and it'll finish cooking in its own time. The other thing I have, and I don't know whether you would have them in America, is a thing called a Breville hot cup. And I promise you, I don't get any payment for advertising this. This is like you've got a tank of water at the back of this little machine. You stuff the tank into the machine, and then you put a cup under a little tap, press a button on the top, bing, and out comes exactly the right amount of water for your cup, and it's hot. So I never mess around with those stupid little things where, you put it in, a probe in, and it goes buzz.
Oh, and it beeps, yeah.
I'm not having to handle a hot, heavy kettle of boiling water and put it into a cup. This is much safer. And it's actually much more economic because you're only heating exactly the right amount of water that goes into the cup, nothing else.
Right.
That's really good. I have lots of knobbles on things. So my cooker, I have a gas cooker, gas oven and gas hob. In fact, I've got two ovens, and they're all on turn buttons. No pressy buttons, just turn buttons,
Right.
so that I know where they go for the temperature. And I like gas because I listen to it. So I can be on one side of the kitchen chopping, and I can listen to the pans behind me, and I can hear how they're cooking, and I can hear, oh, that water's coming up to the boil, I can turn that down. Oh, that pan, I've got some oil in there, that's starting to spit, let me turn that down, let me put a heat diffuser underneath it. I also cook with by smell. So, I can be in the kitchen, I can smell the sugar in that cake starting to caramelize. That means that cake is just about done. Those biscuits, yes, I can smell that. That bread, yes, I can smell that. And often other people are not smelling it that quickly because they have the same quality of smell, I'm sure, but they're just not so focused on it.
Right.
So I have lots of adaptations in how I arrange my kitchen. In my cupboards, certainly the under-counter cupboards, I don't have shelves. I have metal drawers, which are originally designed for pots and pans or vegetables or something.
Right.
But I can pull out a whole drawer, and so I don't have to scrabble around trying to things at the back of a cupboard. Everything comes out to me. And then I use lots of ice cream boxes. I expect you get ice cream in sort of standard shaped boxes over there, commercially. And I have lots of those empty boxes, and I can fill those so I can stack things into my baskets so I can get more into them. And they also sort things. So I know that all the ramekins that size are in that box and they're in the back left, and the ramekins of another size are in that box and they're in back right. So it's really easy to find things because I find that I have to memorize the contents of every drawer, every cupboard throughout the whole house. And there must be hundreds of them. And really and truly, I think visually impaired people use their memory an enormous amount.
That's probably good for your brain.
It is. And can I tell you, these times in hospital, and when at the moment I've been on some pretty awful painkillers, and by goodness, they make my brain very muddled. And so it's very depressing when you're struggling with pain, you can't move, you want to recover your lifestyle, you can't see, and actually you're not remembering things very well either. So I've had to learn to accept all of this and just battle on, do the extra exercise that the physiotherapist wants me to do, take the medication, but start reducing it, start being more active, not give up. It would be really easy to give up and lay on the bed, listen to the radio and these talking books. But I've got too much more to do before I want to give in like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, one of the videos that I watched, so if folks want to find you, they can go to pennymelvillebrown.com or go to YouTube and see your videos. And one of them I watched was with two of the ladies from the Talking Newspaper Federation, and you are making homemade mincemeat.
We've just done that.
And which is like a very traditional, not so much maybe here. Like I know in my family, we don't have, mincemeat, mince pies at Christmas, but I know in England, and for English folks, that's very traditional. And I've only seen it. I'm here, if I go to the grocery store and there's a European section, there'll be some jar that says it's mincemeat, and it looks absolutely horrible. And so I've never been tempted to try it. And I know it doesn't, I knew it didn't have actually meat in it,
No.
which folks may not know if they've never looked into it. It's mostly fruit. But when I saw and heard you making this, I thought, I was kind of inspired. I thought I might have to make this. It sounded really, really good. All these fruits and sherry and brandy and nuts and all sorts of, and spices, of course, all sorts of good things.
Well, mincemeat used to be made with meat, but this was, centuries ago. Mm-hmm. So now all it is, if you think of a big metal bowl, it needs to be an oven-proof bowl, and into that you put dried raisins, currants, sultanas, cherries, apricots, anything else you've got hanging around, nuts, so chopped almonds, Brazil nuts, juice of lemons, juice of oranges, lemon zest, orange zest. All my dried fruits I would soak for a couple of months in some alcohol, sherry, port, brandy, rum, whatever. The only thing that you might find difficult is we would mix it with stuff called suet. Now, suet was originally the fat that you found around kidneys. Do you know what I mean by kidneys in your body?
Yeah, maybe that's lard here.
Yeah, but you can buy it. But also a hard block of vegetable fat would work probably just as well. Mm-hmm. Oh, and the last thing you put into this are fresh apples. And because I'm here in the garden, I have apple trees, and they were planted in about 1870,
Oh, wow.
Slightly before America. But I still get wonderful crops of apples. So I chop fresh apples into it. So you put all this stuff into this bowl, stir it all up, might leave it overnight. It's got all the spices, stuff it into the oven on a very low setting for 3 hours. And so it all gets hot and the fat melts and it coats the apple and everything. Then you've put the jars in the bottom of the oven just so that they get sterilised, but they're also hot. Out it all comes, pop into the jars, lid on, mincemeat. And with that mincemeat, you might take, do you know a puff, do you understand puff pastry?
Yes.
Yeah, so you might make puff pastry, or you might use a short crust pastry, make little individual tarts, fill them up with this mincemeat, lid on in the oven and cook. We can make big ones. What we do here is we have lots of apples, and we make them into, just chop up apples, take the cores out. Sometimes I'll peel them, sometimes I won't. Then I put mincemeat on the top, blah, 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 blah. And then a crumble topping. So that will be oats, butter, sugar, and chopped hazelnuts over the top, into the oven. Fabulous pudding. All the recipes are on the website.
That sounds wonderful. Well, you have a whole recipe book of Christmas or holiday recipes on your website.
I do. It's a free, you could just download it for free. And so there's certainly mincemeat on that. I literally made Christmas puddings, made 16 Christmas puddings, just little individual ones. Well, actually they're for 2, but 16 puddings that will feed 32 people if they're not too greedy. Made those the other week. And they're steamed. And we are planning to make the Christmas cakes tomorrow. So I will probably make one big Christmas cake, which will be very similar ingredients, but butter, not lard, and eggs, and all whisked up just as you might make an ordinary cake. But it's very fruit intense. And fruit has been soaking in brandy for 3 months. And so
Oh, wow.
we will make this, and you cook it in a very slow oven, very low temperature. It won't rise very much. And when it comes out, I will take it out of the tin, and then I get my syringe. And every good cook has a syringe, which you take up brandy, and then you feed the cake with brandy. You press it in, push the syringe in, and that pushes brandy into the cake. And you do that every day for a week or so. Then you cover it with apricot jam, then marzipan, and then royal icing. And then you decorate it. And what I haven't told you is I also am quite creative. So I work in pewter, which is a metal. And so I made about 20 odd little tiny pewter Christmas crackers that come out of the cupboard every year, and they go onto the Christmas cake to decorate it.
Oh, that's lovely.
Happy Christmas.
Yes, that is quite a process. Is that your favorite holiday treat? Do you have like favorite holiday dishes Christmas dishes that you make?
There's all sorts. So we might make some stollen, which is, I think it's German. So that's a bread, but it's an enriched dough with sugar and butter and things like that in it. But you also put in fruit into it, fruit and nuts, and then you roll it up and cook it. And it rises like a bread. But because it's so rich, it's not going to rise that much. We would have turkey for Christmas. So literally, I've just ordered turkey from our butcher, and he will do any butchering that I need for it. And he will make me a little joint of gammon to go for the Christmas lunch. What else? Christmas pudding would be the classic one to have that on Christmas Day after the Christmas lunch. We have sprouts. Do you know sprouts, Brussels sprouts?
Brussels sprouts, yeah.
Delicious.
How do you cook them? Because so many people don't like them, but then when they're cooked in certain ways, people find that they do like them after all.
Well, I think lots of people are thinking about the old types of Brussels sprouts, which were quite bitter. We're talking, decades ago. Now I just, you can slap them in the microwave, you can steam them, you can boil them, but just don't do it for too long because you want them to be crisp and just have that flavour. I'm getting a duck as well. And like chicken, I cook ducks and chicken extremely slowly. So I will brine them the day before. So they sit in the fridge overnight in cold water and salt. The next day they come out and just get rinsed off and dried. Put some herby butter under the skin. And then I put them in the oven on the very lowest temperature I can do it. And often that will be at 50 degrees centigrade, which would be extraordinarily low for you. And it will sit there for 3.5 hours. And then out comes my trusty thermometer. I make sure I check the temperature of the chicken or the duck or the turkey. And when you're checking temperature, you need to make sure you're not touching bone because bone conducts the heat very well. So that means the bone will be hotter than the meat round it. So you go into the thick part of the thigh or the breast and you check that it's got to 70 degrees. If that's done, out it comes. Cover it with foil, kitchen foil, and then cover it with a proper towel because you want to keep it warm and let it rest for an hour. And then during that hour, you cook your roast potatoes. And if you want a tip for roast potatoes, I'll give you that in a minute. And then you turn the oven right up to its top temperature. That would be gas mark 9 for me. And whack in the chicken or duck once you've taken off all the foil and the towel for 5 minutes. And that will caramelize the skin, crisp it, and you will have the moistest chicken you've ever had.
Wow.
Do it all the time. It's really successful. And it takes no time. The longest bit of it is making some brine, putting some butter under the skin, and wrapping it in foil later on. It's ridiculously simple. What I've found is that trying to cook a whole roast dinner on a morning when you've got guests or other things going on is pretty difficult. So I like to prepare all my vegetables the day before, and then I will store them in cold water with some salt in the fridge with lids on so that I can get them all out on the day, drain them off and steam them or however I'm going to cook them. The potatoes, I will parboil them. So they're peeled. I parboil them the day before. So that's put them in cold water, bit of salt, bring them up to the boil, give them 2-3 minutes boiling, take them off, drain them. And then I have a foil tray. About, it depends how greedy you are. Here I make lots of roast potatoes. So I've got a foil tray, perhaps 12 inches by 10 inches. And I use foil because it's easier to manage later on. I throw the drained potatoes in there, and then I'll add goose fat or oil or whatever you're using. And the important thing now is to turn those potatoes over, and they are a bit hot, so watch your fingers. But I always use using my fingers. Bit hot, turn them over, and that's stopping them getting any air at them. So the oil is sealing all over your potatoes. I put the cardboard lid on the top of the foil tray and lob it in the oven, in the fridge rather. And so it sits in the fridge overnight. And when that chicken or turkey or duck comes out of the oven, I turn it up to a much higher temperature, take my potatoes out of the fridge, take off the lid, whack them in the oven, and they'll cook for 45 minutes, might get turned over halfway through. And so there are the roast potatoes done, and then the chicken just needs to go back into a hot oven for 5 minutes. And there's the basis of my roast lunch done.
It's done. Oh, well, it sounds like you're going to have a fantastic Christmas lunch.
But the point is, it's something that, dare I say it, even a blind person can do. It's not difficult. It means that you're not slaving away on the day. You're not getting into a muddle. You're not getting confused. You can do it in stages that are all manageable, pre-prepared, and so that therefore you can enjoy the day yourself and not just be frazzled in the kitchen.
In the kitchen, yeah. Well, I want to be sure we tell everybody once again, if they're looking for your recipes, or also I know on your website, it's not just cooking. You have disability dynamics tab, and so lots of other information on the site, pennymelvillebrown.com. So it's a very informative site, cooking and otherwise. Your book, A Cook's Tour, Baking Blind Goes Global, is available on Amazon. And am I correct? The Kindle version has links to the YouTube demonstrations?
It does. So you can just click on them. If you're a Kindle user, just click on the link and it'll take you straight to the video. And you will be able to see me with the people I met all around the world. And they are all super.
Yes, and I definitely would recommend looking at Penny on YouTube because the videos are so entertaining, and whether you're wanting to cook the recipe or not, they're very entertaining, and you meet such wonderful people. Well, Penny, any final thoughts for our listeners?
Well, I wish you all a very Merry Christmas when it comes. I do suggest that if you've thought about mincemeat or proper English Christmas puddings or other things that we cook at Christmas, do go onto the website. There is, it's just a little simple, free, downloadable booklet with lots of things in there, from a sort of 25-minute, very simple bread to other things that you can make for Christmas presents or for your own family at Christmas, or just for you to be indulgent. Enjoy it. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your experiences and travels and challenges and successes with us. I know that our listeners will have enjoyed hearing from you, and I'm sure they've will have learned a lot and really been encouraged as well. Thank you all for listening to Navigating Life with Vision Loss. I just want to remind you, as in November, as we're getting towards the end of the year, that next year, instead of this program being brought to you by the Audio Information Network of Colorado, we will be changing our name to AfterSight, which is much easier to say and to remember. So that will be happening, and our podcast, AfterSight, will be changing its name to The Blind Chick. So, and it will still be hosted by Penn Street. So there's some things to look forward to in the new year. And as always, I hope that this program has helped you to navigate your life with vision loss.